Get the recording going. Tonight, shiur Yilu Nishmat Avi Mari Dover Ben Reuven Halevi Imi Merati Rachel Bat Harav Michael. Tonight, shiur is also Yilu Nishmat Reuven Ben Moshe Halevi, my grandfather, whose yahrzeit was today. And tonight, we're going to speak about the one pasuk in the parsha of Kedoshim. Kedoshim. First, we read parshat Achrimot and Kedoshim. We have two parashot that we read this week, this Shabbat, as is the norm for a non-leap year, a regular year. We generally have parashot during the month following Pesach that we read together because we have all these extra parashot that we need to read during a leap year for the extra Shabbatot that we don't apply. So we were reading Achrimot and Kedoshim, but tonight we're going to talk about Kedoshim, and we're going to specifically talk about one pasuk in Kedoshim. This is Perek Yud Tet, pasuk Yud Daled, which has some interesting things about it, which we're going to hopefully find out as we go on. Okay, so first I'm going to read the pasuk very simply. It says, "Lo tikalel cheresh." You shouldn't curse a deaf person. Lifnei iver, and before a blind person, lo titein michshol. You should not place a stumbling block. The Yarei Tamei Elohecha, and you should be fearful of your God. Ani Hashemayim Hashem. First and foremost, you'll notice I've highlighted a few words in this pasuk because I think it's important to realize that the word tikalel, or lo tikalel, really only appears twice in the entire Torah. Once in our parsha, and the second time you'll see immediately listed below in Parashat Mishpatim, in Shmot Perek Chav Bet Pasuk Chav Zayin, it tells us Elohim lo tikalel, that we should not curse Elohim. And there the Gemara wants to tell us that Elohim there refers to judges generally, or anyone in power, but more so to judges specifically in the judiciary. V'nasibi amcha lo ta'or, and you should not, again, curse a leader among your people. So those are the two places in the Torah where this concept occurs of not to curse somebody. The second thing is that the word michshol, which I've highlighted in green above, does not appear elsewhere in the entire Torah. It appears in Navi, it appears in various different forms throughout the Nevi'im, but it does not appear elsewhere in the Torah. Just thought that was just an interesting sidelight. If I look at the pasuk, it seems to contain three different mitzvot, but perhaps there are only two, perhaps there are more. We're going to try to understand that. So first it says, it relates to two different types of people who have what we used to call handicaps. What today we have to call, I don't know what the politically correct term is, but one person is a cheresh, he cannot hear, he has lost his hearing, and the other person is an iver, is a person who is blind. So these two people are people who clearly need our help, not our hindrance. And of course, therefore, the Torah doesn't say, please go out of your way to help the cheresh and help the iver, which is what we might have thought it would say. But it tells us that we should make sure that we do not abuse them. However, it's very interesting because if we look at the concept of lo tikalel, we already have a pasuk of lo tikalel previously in Mishpatim, and that's what the Parashnim are going to ask first about this pasuk. Why is it that I need a specific pasuk of lo tikalel cheresh if we already have other psukim telling us not to be mekalel people? So Rashi is we're going to start, of course, as we usually do with Rashi. Rashi tells us that this pasuk of lo tikalel cheresh, even though it seems to be a very narrow negative commandment. Okay, somebody's deaf, I shouldn't curse, but it seems to apply anybody who's not deaf, I can go ahead and curse, right? Okay. Rashi says, no. Quoting, of course, the Gemara, Eili ela cheresh. If I really read this verse literally, it only applies to somebody who is deaf. Minayin l'rabot kol adam. How do I know that it really includes everybody? I'm not allowed to curse anybody. Talmud lomar, we will reduce that from the verse that says, Amcha lo ta'or. Amongst your people, you should not curse somebody. Im kain, if that's the case that it applies to everybody, why does the Torah specifically refer to the cheresh? Lama nemar cheresh. Why does the Torah start out with a cheresh if it applies to everybody? Ma cheresh miyuchad shehu b'chayim. Rashi tells us the cheresh is to teach a specific principle that a deaf person means they're alive, because we're all, the only time you have a distinction between somebody who can hear and somebody who is deaf is while they're alive. So ma cheresh shemiyuchad shehu b'chayim af kol shehu b'chayim yotza hamet she'eno b'chayim. It seems, Rashi says, the mitzvah is that there is a negative commandment to curse somebody who is alive. But that commandment seems to disappear when somebody is dead. We don't have the same obligation not to curse somebody who is dead, which also seems a little challenging. But again, what Rashi is trying to tell us that the commandment, the punishment, is not the same if you curse somebody who is already dead as opposed to somebody who is alive. We're going to see some of the parshatim later. We're going to try to address why that might be versus how else we can, what else this is supposed to be teaching us. Then Rashi goes to the second section of the verse, which says, and Rashi is going to tell us that again, just like the first part of the pasuk is not meant only in a narrow sense, but is meant in a very, very broad sense, so too Rashi wants to tell us that the second section of the pasuk is a very, very broad negative commandment. Rashi tells us very simply, it doesn't mean only that somebody who has physically lost his sight, you can't put a stumbling block in front of it. It means hasuma b'davar. Anybody who is blind, who could not see and understand something the same way you understand it, don't give him advice that is improper for him. Al Tomar, you should not say, advise somebody to sell their field and buy a donkey. Okay, for love, and you are going to go around him, because your intent is to buy the field. You want to tell him to sell it. You're giving him this advice that he should sell it. You don't need all the trouble of having a field. You're giving him all these good reasons when you're really doing it because you have an ulterior motive. So if I were to translate according to Rashi, it means very, very simply that you should be very, very wary of conflicts of interest. Very, very simply, that when you are called and asked to give advice to somebody in any matter, it means that they are relying on you to use your best judgment, not for your own benefit, but to give them the advice that's suitable for them, not the advice that's suitable for you. So again, we have to be very, very careful, because oftentimes throughout our lives, in many different capacities, we are asked to give advice. We are asked by people, whether it's in issues of money, whether it's in issues of dealing with a community, dealing with a specific issue, dealing with a specific person. We are often, very frequently asked for advice, and we always, before we answer, we have to stop, step back for a second, and make sure that the answer that we are giving is the answer that is suitable for the person we are giving the answer to, not suitable or most beneficial to us. Not the easiest mitzvah to keep. Although, if we looked at it from a very, very literal and simple translation, okay, how many blind people do I know that I'm going to throw and put a block in front of them so they should trip? Not many people go about doing that. So that's a pretty obvious thing. But Rashi is saying that this is not meant in a narrow sense, it's meant in a broad sense. Rashi continues now, the third section in the verse says, you should be fear of God. Why? Because this item, specifically here referring to giving advice to other people, Eino masur labriot, leida imdato shel zelatova olera'a. One cannot always discern whether the person who I have asked for advice is really giving me advice that's suitable for me, or he's giving me advice that's suitable for him. And he can always push back and say, hey, I'm sorry it turned out bad, but I meant it. I was had your best intentions in mind. Therefore, you must be fearful of Hashem, who understands what it is that you thinking. So in other words, if you are giving somebody advice, and in a sense, well, because if I give advice to do this, that's going to impact negatively on me, then Hashem knows why you're giving him that advice. So you need to either tell him directly, hey, I'm giving you this advice because it's best for me, in which case you're not hiding from him. You're not trying to mislead him. You are giving him the facts. Hey, I'm not sure what you should do, but if you ask me what you should do that I would think would be the best thing for me, here's what I think you should do. You want to do that, most people will stop asking you for advice if that's the way you answer them. But that's the way you have to do it if you want to avoid tripping yourself over this stumbling block, because it is a very easy for us to think, to rationalize a way that we're giving them advice that's suitable for them, when in reality we're giving them advice that's suitable for us. And that's why it says here, that Hashem, who understands what you're thinking when you're giving this advice, he knows what you're thinking. And Rashi says similarly, Kol davar masur lelibo shel adam ha'oseyu. Anything that is, again, determined by the feelings, the emotions, the intent of the person who is doing it. The Ein Shar Habriot Makirot Bo, and the rest of the world can't tell whether they are motivated negatively or positively. Nemar Bo V'Yarei Tamei Elokecha, which, by the way, this verse V'Yarei Tamei Elokecha does appear numerous times in our parsha in a numerous different contexts, and all of them, Rashi is saying, are telling us that where there are instances where I can quote, plead that I was doing it innocently, not willfully trying to harm this person. Hashem knows the answer whether I was or I wasn't, and that's why it tells us V'Yarei Tamei Elokecha. So Rashi has basically tied the three sections of the verse together, because in each of these cases we have some instance of there needs to be a how are you feeling. Although it's, again, Rashi seems to say the V'Yarei Tamei Elokecha seems to imply most to the Lifnei Iyar, yet it also would apply seemingly in case of the previous. Okay, Sifsei Chachamim has a very simple question. The Im Tomar, if you want to ask, I want to ask the question. How does Rashi, what is it that forces Rashi or that causes Rashi to say that this, you shouldn't place a stumbling block before the blind man, is a broad mitzvah, not a narrow mitzvah? Maybe it's only the narrow mitzvah. Where does Rashi get that idea from? And we're going to try to figure that out. He says, V'yesh lomar, the Rashi bi'atzmo mitaretz v'yarei tamei elokecha shadavar masul alev. Rashi is trying to answer that question with his next comment. In other words, the comment that Rashi says that anything that can be interpreted in either negative or positive, Hashem knows how you meant it. That's why Rashi, the fact that pasuk appears here, is what forces Rashi to say that this mitzvah of lifnei iver lo titain michshol has to be a broad mitzvah. It can't be a narrow mitzvah. Okay? If I translate it literally in a very narrow sense, putting a stumbling block before a blind person, everybody can see what you've done, except the blind person, obviously. But anybody who is watching you can see what you've done, and it's obvious that you've done something negative. He's placed something that the blind guy is going to trip over because the blind guy can't see it, which is inappropriate. But everybody can see that he did it willfully and maliciously, unless obviously it was an accident. But then he's not over on lifnei iver. If he does it willfully and maliciously, obviously everybody can see that it's not. We wouldn't have this verse of V'Yarei Tamei Elokecha, that we have to be in awe of God and be aware that God is watching over us, even though people don't know why we're doing this. Hashem knows why we're doing it. That wouldn't apply in the literal case of placing a stumbling block before a blind person. Elavade, therefore, Rashi was forced to say it's definitely Ein Perusho Kimishma'o. The literal sense is not the only sense of the verse here, because otherwise it would not have V'Yarei Tamei Elokecha. So Rashi is consistent here, and Zicham is just helping us understand what Rashi's reasoning is and where he gets it from. Okay, Bechor Shor is going to say something very simple, but he's going to add a little bit. That's why I wanted to quote him. He says the following: Lo techalel cheresh. We're back to the first part of the verse that you shouldn't curse a deaf person. He says, "Hu adin l'chol Yisrael," which is what Rashi just said. The same thing applies to every Jew. She'oseh maseh amcha, as long as he is following the Torah, or he is living, he is doing appropriate, he's appropriately living as a Jew. He did not kill on, as we learn it out, b'binyan of mecheresh v'nasi v'dayan. We learn it out. There are three different times it says we shouldn't curse. One is a deaf person, the other is the ruler, and the third is the judge. Ki dichsiv, as we had the pasuk that I quoted above, Elohim lo tekalel v'nasi v'amcha lo ta'or. Shouldn't curse the judge or the leader. And from looking at all of those, what do they all have in common? They're all Jews, and they all live amongst the people. Umihu. However, why does the verse say lo tikalel cheresh instead of lo tikalel period? Why does it add the word cheresh? Umihu davar hakatuf b'hoveh. The verse is picking a normal thing. Normally, what would we do? We would normally, if we want to curse somebody, we would curse somebody who can't hear anyway. Who am I going to curse? I'm going to curse somebody who can't hear me, curse them anyway. Who can't hear me? Person who's deaf can't hear me, so he's not going to make a difference to him. Since he doesn't hear me curse him, he's not going to curse me back. Whereas if I curse anybody else, they're going to curse me back. So I don't want somebody to curse me back, Bechor Shor says, so I'm only going to curse deaf people. Okay. Why, on the other hand, does the other verse talk about an Asi, a leader, and a Dayan, a judge? However, the reason the pasuk picks the leadership of a leader and a judge, because these are people who try to correct you when you've done something. In other words, they are warning you and giving you rebuke when you do things wrong. The judge's job is to mete out a sentence to you when you've done something wrong and to chastise you for having done it wrong. The leader's rule is to keep you in line. So each of these people are curbing your ability to do whatever you want, to be in charge. So therefore, people sonimotam, people hate them and want to curse them, and that's why the pasuk specifically mentions them not to. The cheresh, and the cheresh, what is the cheresh? Kol oto she'eno shomea ve'eno mevinlo. Not only somebody who literally is a cheresh who can't hear him, but even somebody who can hear him physically but can't understand him. So if you curse somebody who doesn't speak the language you're speaking, that would be the same thing according to Bechor Shor. He demetargim unklos, as the Targum tells us. What does it mean? How does he translate cheresh to lo shama? He's somebody who can't hear. So in other words, he doesn't either hear or understand what you're saying. Okay, so that's the first part. The lifnei iver, and before the blind person, misha hu iver b'davar, somebody who is blind concerning something. Bafilu mezi, even if he is willfully doesn't want to learn about the thing. He can only do it through somebody helping him. Somebody who wants to do something that he shouldn't be doing anyway, but he needs help to do it. Okay? So Bechor Shor is taking you that lifnei iver means even if somebody asks me to help them out, but I know that I'm helping them out to do something they shouldn't be doing, I have to, again, be careful. Okay? Kigon, and he gives examples, which the Gemara gives. Moshit kos yayin linazir. A nazir is somebody who's forbidden to drink wine. And he asks me, I'm standing on one side of the river, he's standing on the other side of the river. There's a bottle of wine, or there's a wine store right on my side of the river, and he can't get to this side of the river because there's no ferry. He can't swim across the river. But he knows if I get the wine, I can, get it across the river too. I can stretch out my hand, even though it seems a little strange how I'm going to get it to him, but whatever. The fact of the matter is, I'm going to give him the wine that he can't reach from his side of the water. Maybe the water is very, very deep, or the water is running very rapidly. I don't know, but we can reach over and give him the cup of wine to drink. Okay? I'm not supposed to. That's lifnei iver. Even if he asks me for it, I'm not supposed to help him. The Aver min achayla ben Noach, or to give a piece of meat that a Noachite is not allowed to eat to somebody who is a Noachite. Dekai betray Ifrei Naharo, or on opposite sides of a riverbank. Really not a riverbank. It's more like a canal bank, a brook bank. Yeah, but where he can't get across, but you can reach across to him. Or maybe you can throw it across. I don't know how you can throw a cup of wine, but certainly a piece of meat you can throw across the river a little bit further than you can reach. Okay, why does the verse end with that? Before sure says, even though even though this one cannot hear you, and so you might think it's okay to do it since he doesn't hear you, it's no big deal. You should know that somebody is seeing and hears the Yodea HaKol and knows everything. So again, the verse ends that no matter what we're doing, no matter where we are and what we're doing, we have to be aware that Hashem is always watching. Very, very straightforward, very, very simple. And that's why, even though these two cases seem to be cases where the person doesn't know who's harmed them, it doesn't matter. Hashem knows who's harmed them, and that should be enough to keep us from doing it. I mean, our own conscience should be enough to keep you from doing it. But even for those who don't have a conscience, the fact that Hashem is aware of what you're doing, it should be a deterrent. Ramban again goes through the same thing. He quotes Rashi. Lo tikal al-cheresh, ainli al-cheresh, man rabot kol adam. How do I know everybody? I'm not supposed to curse. Talmud lo b'yam chalot ta'or. Im kein lo maner al-cheresh, macher nishur b'chaim, yotza meisha ein b'chaim loshon Rashi. V'uchani b'torat kohanim. And he says that Rashi, by the way, did this up out of whole cloth. He got it from Torat Kohanim, the Midrash on Vayikra. That's where he got this Drash from. Aval HaMidrash b'Gemara ain't okay. The Midrash in the Gemara, which looks at this pasuk, translates this verse slightly differently. We know that the verse warns us concerning honorable people. They're honorable amongst the people. Hadayan v'anasi, the judge and the ruler, as we have the pasuk. Same pasuk we quoted above. Now here, why do I need this second verse? So now that it's told us, oh, you can't curse the honorable people, this verse comes to tell you can't even curse those people who you might think are downtrodden and you might think are dishonorable. You shouldn't be cursing them either. Those who are downtrodden, who are lower in the class of society. Who may have now, since we've now taken both ends of the spectrum, now we learn to include everybody, because now we have what is the common feature that these people have, the Cheresh and the Dayan and the Nasi. They're all people, they're all Jews, and therefore we shouldn't be cursing anybody. He min harosh v'ad hasof hakol bichlal ho'azhara. Everybody is included in the warning. And umilat be'amcha, however, the reason it says be'amcha, amongst your people, is not necessarily to add anything else, but except nidrash be'oseh ma'aseh amcha loti harishaim. It says only people who are following in the path of Judaism are people you're not supposed to curse. But people who are not, it's okay. It's not okay, but they're excluded from the mitzvah. But in a very simple way, Ramban says, he mentions the cheresh concerning being cursed. Why? I would think, hey, it's okay to curse a deaf person. Why? Because he doesn't hear, right? It's not going to make any difference. If he's not going to get angry, it's not going to harm him. It's not going to do anything to him personally because he can't hear it. Nonetheless, he's here at Torah Allah. The Torah still warns us that we shouldn't do it. And how much more so? Certainly, how much more shouldn't we be cursing people who will become embarrassed when we curse them and will be very upset? And possibly, as Bechor Shor said, will curse us back. But nonetheless, Ramban says the fact that he's mentioning Cheresh is even though to show how much more so does it apply to anybody else. If the Cheresh, who doesn't really care because he can't hear, we're not allowed to curse, how much more so can we not curse somebody who can hear and will get upset? The ode, and another reason it picks this example, the Torah, he has here it will pick the most likely case. Torah usually picks the most likely or frequently occurring case. Who's a person going to curse? A deaf person, somebody who can't hear. Who is he going to try to cause to trip? Somebody who can't see. Shelo yira mehem, because he is not afraid of any retribution from them. Ki lo yadu v'lo yavinu. They won't know, and they have no idea who did this. Al kain, therefore, the pasuk ends, you should be wary, fearful of God, in awe of God, who knows everything that's going on, everything that you think is hidden, that the blind person can't see, the deaf person can't hear. God hears, God sees. However, if that's the case, if according to Ramban, just that deaf shot is from the fact that I'm allowed to curse a deaf person and who can't hear me, obviously I can't curse anybody else who can hear me. Why do I need it to tell me about cursing a judge or cursing a leader? I don't need that verse. It seems extra, superfluous. The reason it adds the extra verse about rulers of the judge and the leader, generally, people will curse them in secret after they get home. They had a tough day in court. The judge was getting on their case, and they come home and they start cursing out the judge. I'd say Resha. If he came out that he was the guilty party and he lost, he's going to be angry at the judge. And by cursing the judge and the nasi, many people fall. By your cursing them and other people overhearing you, many people will come to hate them. And they will rise up against them. But it's only through their rulership that we have a society that functions. If we didn't have leaders, we would have anarchy. So it's very important not to be cursing people, especially in public, especially leaders. Despite the fact that you may disagree with them, it's perfectly okay to disagree with their positions, but not to curse them as people. You can disagree respectfully with their stances on certain issues, that's fine, but not to curse the person. It's like the same thing in parenting. You don't criticize the child, you may criticize the action, you may criticize what they've done, but never criticize the person, because that causes all sorts of problems. Okay. Rabbeinu Bechaya tells us the following. Okay? Again, very, very similar to where Ramban started. He's here at Katuv Cheresh. The reason the pasuk lists a Cheresh, a deaf person in terms of not cursing, Kedei Lomod Kal V'chomer, to learn from a case to the most obvious to the less obvious case to the more obvious case. Ima Cheresh Shelo Yishma Kishum Kaleloto. He's here of Torah. If the Torah warns us that we're not allowed to curse somebody who doesn't hear us when we curse him, Ain't Sarich Lomar, there's no reason for the Torah to add Mishishma V'hitkatzev V'hitbayesh. If somebody who can hear your curse and will become upset and embarrassed. What is the purpose of this mitzvah as well as the other one we have? Is to teach us that not only are we responsible for our actions, we also have to be very, very careful because we are responsible for our words. We not only have to be careful in our actions and build a fence around our actions that we don't act inappropriately, but we also have to be gadur. We have to build a fence. We have to be careful in our speech. We should not become accustomed to evil speech, doing anything evil approaches. The Now, Rabbeinu Chai has a very, very interesting concept here. The Isur is not because his friend is going to hear it. Ela mitzad atzmo, from his own perspective. Okay? The imu gadur bezeh etzel hacheresh, and that's why it's important for him. We're not It's not directed about against his that he shouldn't curse his friend. It's he from him. He's hurting himself by cursing someone else. If he will guard himself concerning this, concerning somebody who is deaf, certainly he will guard himself to not curse somebody who hears. So if he doesn't say anything bad about somebody who even can't even hear him, he's not going to say something bad about somebody who can hear him. And therefore he's of cheresh. Therefore it lists cheresh, a deaf person, and from cheresh alone we learn everybody else. That's one reason. And the second reason, as the Ramban said, Pasuk speaks about the normal situation. The people will pick on people who they think don't see or hear what's going on. And therefore the pasuk ends and he quotes the same thing. Rashi quotes okay. And therefore he ends in that. I'm going to skip. He then quotes the pasuk from Mishlei. And Hiskir Shlomo Olav Shalom and Mishlei. Ki tomar hein lo yadanu zeh halo tuchan libot hu yavin. Don't think when you think, oh, nobody's watching what I'm doing. Just remember, Hashem understands what's going on. The notes are nafsh, the one who created your soul, who yeda beheshiv ladam kifa Allah, and he will repay to a person according to his deeds. And this is what the Mishnah Pirkei Avos teaches us. We should be aware. What is above you? Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Ayin roa. Hashem has an eye that sees all. The ozen shomat, an ear that hears all. And everything you do is going to be inscribed in a book. So basically, Rabbeinu Chaya is telling us very simply, very similar to what Ramban said, but he adds this whole concept of that we have to always be aware of Hashem's presence, whatever we're doing in life, wherever we are, whenever we are, whatever we are. We always have to be aware of Hashem's presence because Hashem is watching us. Okay. Turim, very interesting comment here. Okay. He says, Lo titei michshol is chaser vav. Michshol is written without a vav. Okay. This vav, in other words, Balaturim basically says the same thing Rashi says, that the pasuk Lo titei michshol is to be translated broadly. But Balaturim wants to understand, where do we understand that from? What is it that teaches us that? He says because there's a vav missing in the word michshol. If the word had been written normally, I would have said okay, but it's written without a letter. What does that teach us? Lomar afilu eino notein michshol mamash. Even if I don't put a literal stumbling block in front of him, el afilu yatso davar lefidarko asur. Now again, he quotes it from the same place, but he adds this little simple thing that I thought was interesting. The fact that the vav is missing is what teaches us that this has to be a very broad sentence rather than a very narrow. Although, as I said, Sifsei Chachamim wanted to say that Rashi learns it from the V'yareitza Milokecha, Balaturim gives a different approach. Okay. Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi, the super commentator on Rashi, again tries to explain where again Rashi gets some of his derivation from. So Rashi starts with Lo T'chal Cheresh Ein Li Ela Cheresh. Minayin l'rabot et kol adam Talmud lo v'yam chalot ta'or. He's quoting Rashi, and he says this is from Torah Kohanim. And now he wants to get behind this midrash and say, why? What is this? What does this come to teach us? Because the pasuk in Shmot in Mishpatim should have written v'nasi lo ta'or, not v'nasi bi'amcha lo ta'or. Why bi'amcha? Why does the pasuk add bi'amcha? L'midrash kol sheba'amcha lo ta'or. To add the drash, the word be'amcha, amongst your people, is added to say everyone amongst your people is included. Ke'ilu amar, as if to say, Elohim lo tekalel v'nasi, you shouldn't curse a judge or a nasi, u'be'amcha lo ta'or, you shouldn't curse anybody among the people. U'ma shedarshu ba'osei masi amcha, but again, Rashi used that word be'amcha to teach us that it means somebody who is observant, who is keeping on the derech of Judaism. Eino ela min hasmichut. That's not from the word be'amcha, but it's from the context that it's next to the word. To be the samech asharat nasi le'asharat amcha. The fact that it says nasi be'amcha, V'lo amar lo ta'or bi'amucha. It doesn't say blanket, don't curse anybody amongst your people. Lamadnu, it comes to teach us bi'ose mase amcha. Just like the Nasi is following in the path of the Torah, so too, everybody should be following the path of Torah, but that's who's included in this mitzvah. V'gufei de amcha, the azhara b'fnei atzma. The word itself is a warning for everyone. Lomar sheshum echad me'be'amcha lo ta'or. You should not curse anybody amongst the Jewish people. Avol beperak arba miso. The Gemara in Sanhedrin learns out from Elohim lo tichalel. Im eno inyan legufei da'ati minashaya minasi v'cheres b'mamatzinu. Gemara learns it out from other places in a different fashion. It teaches us, these different combinations of psukim teach us all aspects of this mitzvah, that we're not allowed to curse anybody amongst the Jewish people. He disagrees with Ramban, who said that we learned it out from a combination of the two, but no, we learn it out from only from the verse that we said would be ba'amcha. The ode, she'ef sharla dun zebimamatzino. Okay, the reason we can't learn it out because we have the following. Normally, if we want to learn something out from a common factor amongst two different cases, so Raman says, well, since we include the lowest and the highest, the common thing they have in common is that they're Jews, and that just should be okay. However, because I can say, wait a minute, I can narrow what they have in common. Because the Gemara there asks the same question: why can't I learn it out from looking at both together? And the Gemara answers, because each of them have a characteristic that they're different than everybody else. So only people who are different than everybody else couldn't curse if I learned out. Therefore, I add the word bechayim, and that's therefore we add the word bi'amcha, and that's where we learn it out from, and that's what Elio Mizrahi says. Mizrahi says that we learn it out from there, and that's what Rashi's intent is. Yata meitchein b'chayim, again b'torat kohanim. This Rashi also gets this concept that the word of cheresh lo tkalel, lo siman lo tkalel, is to teach us that just like a cheresh is alive, so too has to be somebody who's alive. The lotema, because why would I differentiate between somebody who's alive and somebody who's dead? And the Mizrahi says the following: the lotema, I might think, mekalel chavero dumi tekalel aviv v'imo. If somebody curses somebody else, it should have the same parameters as somebody who curses his parents. Who is obligated? We know that that one who curses his parents is obligated. It's a capital punishment, and even if he curses his parents after they're dead. So I would think that the same thing applies here. Therefore, Rashi says no. Cheresh is to teach us that even though with parents it applies even after death, with everybody else it only applies while they're alive. Okay. Again, Rashi quotes Lifnei Velo. Again, Mizrach quotes from Rashi Lifnei Velo. Don't give bad advice. And again, he quotes that from Torah Kohanim. V'nira li, Mizrahi says the following: Shatam shedrashu kain hu. Why does he say that this is the broad version of Lifnei Ver? Mipnei she'i efshar lomar iver mamash k'mishma'o. The reason I can't say that Iyar means literally a blind person and take the narrow approach, mishum de Iyar dumya de cheresh, because I have in this pasuk two different people. I have the deaf person and the blind person. Now we've just said the deaf person. It doesn't mean only the deaf person. It means everybody. So if ma cheresh lav davka cheresh, if that's referring to everybody, then af Iyar lav davka Iyar. So too, the blind person is not meant as a narrow blind person. It's meant in a broader sense of everybody can be blind or have a blind spot in a certain area. And when they ask you for advice, give them appropriate advice. So again, we have different ways that different people think that Rashi learns out this concept of why it's a broad mitzvah. Okay, Torah Moshe. Torah Moshe has a very different reason why we shouldn't be cursing people, which I thought was very interesting. So we're going to go through this here. Yesh Lomar, I want you to understand, Kikol HaMikalel Chavero Yisrael, anybody who curses another Jew is not cursing the other Jew. Harehu Mekulal, he's cursing himself. How do I know that? Ki dichsiv, because the pasuk says, Orarecha Arur, those that curse you will be cursed themselves. Ukidei lahatzil et zesh and kalel, kidei shlo yikoshel. Okay, in order that the person who wants to curse somebody else, right, that the person who's being cursed should not cause the person who is cursing him to be cursed. Whoever causes his friend to be punished through him is not granted entrance into the area of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, into his boundaries. So somebody who causes somebody else to be punished, okay, is not allowed into Hashem's presence. Nimsa, from here we understand, even though the person who is being cursed, the curse isn't going to fall on him, it's going to fall back on the person who's doing the cursing. He is also going to receive a somewhat of a penalty. To be able to save the one who would have been cursed from that little punishment of being excluded from the Mechitza of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which I don't think is such a small thing. I don't know why Torah Moshe, the Chassid Sofer says it's such a small thing. I think it's not a Ketzad Onesh. And to save ourselves from this, that's why we say in the tefillah after the Amidah, one of the things we say to those that curse me, may my soul be silent. Kedei, in order that I should receive atonement immediately. So through that, nothing should happen to the one who was cursed by possibly cursing him back or other way. The Makalel, the one who is Makalel a cheresh, a deaf person, who doesn't hear him, who doesn't know that he has to grant this person Mechila, so the cheresh is the one who's going to be punished because he doesn't know to forgive the guy for cursing him. The one who's cursing the cheresh is really causing the cheresh to stumble by not being able to forgive him because he can't hear him. I thought it was a very interesting way of looking at this pasuk and the connection between the two of them. So, okay, you can think about that for a while. Then we're going to go to Rav Hirsch, and we're going to close the Hirsch because our time is running out. Okay, Rav Hirsch says the following. Why are these psukim here in this specific location? Adko, up through here in parshat Kedoshim, whose harnu, we have been warned, shelo lahazik adam b'mimono. We shouldn't be hurting people by stealing from them, damaging them, withholding their wages, etc. Lahana'at atzmenu, and we're the ones who are benefiting financially by hurting the other person. This verse comes to us here to warn us about two things. Not only not to damage a person's property, but not to damage a person at all. If we go through the very, very broad implications of these two psukim, we are understanding that the broad intent of these psukim is that we're not supposed to be harming other people. That's what we should be doing. We shouldn't be harming other people, very simply. So it starts with first, we're not supposed to curse. Afilu b'milah. We're not supposed to hurt people by words, even though we have this old saying in America, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. Words can be very harmful. And that's exactly what Rav Hirsch wants us to understand. Even words, which can't do physical damage, we should not cause a person to lose faith in himself by degrading other people, by speaking negatively to other people. You are causing damage to their self-esteem and to their ability to go forward. This is the mashmaut. This is Rav Hirsch says. This is the meaning of the word kilala. Mishoresh klal. The word klal is a stronger version of kal. Kal means light. Kalal means lefachet mishkalo, to lower his value. In other words, to lower his self-esteem, to lower him in his own eyes. Hein haklala mevatat et kol ru'a libo shel hamikalel. The klala, the curse, shows, it brings to light the evil in the heart of the person who is cursing, his evil designs. Rak mitoch she'ein lo koach, but since he doesn't have the physical strength to hurt this other person, hu nimna milora lechavero, so he doesn't want to physically hurt him because he knows he's too weak. The other guy is going to beat him up if he does. So therefore, he tries to hurt him through words. Isra Lot Kalel, therefore the Isra of Lot Kalel, who klali bioter, is very, very broad, he says. Lot Kalel doesn't just mean don't say, oh, you stupid. It means a lot. It covers a lot of ground. Vatosef and cheresh, and the adding of the word, the deaf person, does not come to narrow this mitzvah, but to broaden it. Afilu kilat cheresh asura. Even to curse a cheresh who can't hear you is asur. V'zot, and why is this? Afal pi she'einu shomea. Even if he doesn't hear, he can't hear. V'nimtza she'ein koach bichlalo afilu tzarota. So I would think, who cares, right? Hafuch, because it doesn't harm him. I think it would be okay. Gal mekala latzmahu bichlalo isar. Even the one who curses also is hurt by this curse. So therefore, even somebody who curses himself is included in this Isur. You're not allowed to curse yourself. So all of these things are, again, we have to, Hirsch is very simple. We must be very careful concerning our use of words. And another, the second statement in the verse also has a broad interpretation. Aleinu liot dihirim. We have to be very wary. B'ma'asenu, through our deeds, ubidvarenu, and through our words. Leval yisaknu et shalom re'enu, that we are not to harm the peace of our friends. Mibachina chomarit, either in a physical sense, or musarit, or in a spiritual sense. Lo rak sumabi b'china gufanit. Not only somebody who is physically blind, karu Iyar is called the blind person. Ela kol mishanit avrer b'bechina ruchanit o musarit. Anybody who is blind in a specific physical area or spiritual area. Kol mishanit taver machmataiva, or somebody who, because of their desires, has become blind to the reality. It's anybody who's blind to a specific reality is also blind as far as this pasuk is concerned. Lefikach lo rak some evan b'darkos shel suma. Not only somebody who puts a rock, a boulder, a stone in front of somebody who is physically blind. Ela kol ha'meisi eitza she'eino genet. Anybody who gives an inappropriate advice. Hamoshi dvarim she'efshel ishtamish b'hem lavera, who gives somebody something they can use to do an avera. Kigon, Hamoshi Kos Nazir, Yain Nazir, somebody who gives a Nazir wine. Mocher Neshek Lachashudim, somebody who sells weaponry to somebody who is suspect of criminal activity. Mocher Beged Abadbokilayim, even if you sell a garment that has hidden within it shatnez, you're selling that garment to a Jew, he's going to wear it. And you're causing him to sin because he doesn't know that it is shatnez. If you know that it is shatnez, you shouldn't be selling it. In all of these cases, you are causing causing the purchaser to stumble without his even being aware of it. Any similar types of things that one could do. Anyone who supports or strengthens the hands of those who are sinning through deed or through even just giving emotional support. Hamikareba Adam, somebody who again causes who entices a person to sin, or to anger, because he gets so angry. In other words, somebody who teases somebody else also until he gets so angry that he's going to lash out, or somebody who strikes his son who is of age, who would want to fight back, but he knows he shouldn't because it's his father, but he might get angry enough to fight back. Call Ayla Ofrim al Yisur. Anybody of all these categories we've just mentioned is over on Yisur. By the way, included in this is somebody who purchases goods that they know are stolen, because by buying stolen goods, you're encouraging the robber to continue in his robbery. Nimse Omer. So we see from here, Aleinu liot zihirim. We have to be very wary. B'chol hatchum hagadol, in the entire large area. Shel shlomo achomariv amusari shel re'enu. The existence, the peaceful existence, both spiritual and physical, of our friends. We should sanctify. Is not the right word. We should set aside. We should work hard with all of the care that we can exercise and all of our awareness that we shouldn't willfully do deeds that will cause damage, that will cause any type of damage to somebody else, either spiritual or physical. So again, Rav Hirsch goes into a very, very strong language here, very, very broad application of these mitzvot, that it really applies in many more situations than we might think so if we just read the verse literally. And again, finally includes why v'yareitz hamelokecha. One short thought. No data. We have to always be aware. No human judge is going to haul us into court for any of these things that we've just mentioned. We're going to eventually have to stand in front of God, who sees everything we've done. Since his presence fills the whole world, we have to be responsible for ourselves. And we should be very careful and wary and careful concerning our deeds. As the Medrash ends, all things that are given over to our heart to understand what our intent really is. Therefore, it says, and that's what the pasuk ends with. So I think if we look at this, what seemed to be a very, very straightforward pasuk of not putting a stumbling block for a blind person or not cursing somebody who's deaf, turns out to be a very, very broad mitzvah, a very, very powerful, important mitzvah, that we have to understand that our job here is not to harm others, but to help others, and as always, to always be aware of Hashem's presence in all that we do. And then when you're able to do that, then we will act differently, and we will help bring about a revolution in the way people act, because they will say, hey, wow, that's what we're supposed to be doing as Jews, acting in a godly fashion. And through that, we can help bring about the Gula Shlem Me'er. Thank you all for this thing. I open up now for comments, questions, or feedback. Anybody? Okay. If nobody has any comments, I will wish you all a rest of the good week. And Bezrat Hashem, as far as I know, I don't have anything yet next week. So Bezrat Hashem will be back to regular schedule next week. Just beware that sometime in the end of May or early June, we'll be switching to our summertime of 8:15 as the days get a little longer. But it's not happening yet, not next week yet, but probably 2 or 3 weeks down the road. So Laila Tov to all. Thank you.